Hi everyone and welcome. In today's video, we are going to study general Riemann sums, which is going to generalize what we have been studying in the last few videos about left endpoint, right endpoint, and midpoint approximations. And we're going to see how Riemann sums lead to something called a definite integral. So very exciting stuff coming up. To get started, let's begin by recalling one of the main results from the last class, which is that if f is continuous on some closed interval, then the right endpoint, the left endpoint, and the midpoint approximations all approach a single unique limit, L. So these limits will always exist and they will approach the exact same number, L, as long as f is behaving nicely, i.e. it's continuous. And what I told you before is that these endpoint approximations and midpoint approximations are special cases of something called Riemann sums. So Riemann sum is more general. It's going to relax some of the conditions. For instance, the rectangles do not need to have equal width. So you can create rectangles of different widths. Also, as I hinted at before, the height of every rectangle can be defined using any sample point within the subinterval. So you don't necessarily have to use the left endpoint or the right endpoint or the midpoint function value. You can use any sample point within the subinterval and take the function value at that sample point to be the height of the rectangle. And lastly, in the previous videos, we have been focusing on non-negative functions because then it sort of makes sense how to define the height, right? The height of the rectangle is always going to be positive. But in a Riemann sum, f can take on any real value, positive or negative. And if you have a rectangle that has a negative height, i.e. it's below the x-axis, then we're going to see that this leads to this concept of signed area. So we'll talk about that. So let's talk about how to specify a Riemann sum. To specify a Riemann sum, you need to pick a partition and a set of sample points. What is a partition? Let's call it P. It's simply a choice of points that will divide the given interval AB into n subintervals. And keep in mind that these n subintervals do not necessarily have to have the same width. They could have different widths. And so the partition P can be thought of as a set of points, x0, x1, x2, all the way to xn. And it has some order to it, like x0 has to be the left endpoint, and the xn has to be the far right endpoint of the given interval. And then x1, x2, all the way to xn minus 1 just form like an increasing sequence. And they partition the given interval into chunks, into n chunks. And these chunks don't have to have equal width. As you can see, this has this width, but then this one is a little bit wider. And then this one is like very thin. So with the partition in place, we can define the length of the ith subinterval, which is just from xi minus 1 to xi, as delta xi, which is equal to the right endpoint minus the left endpoint. And please notice that I put this I because previously delta x was a constant, right? We broke the given interval into n equal chunks. And as a result, delta x was always a constant width that we can factor out. But not anymore. The delta xi depends on which interval you're on. So each interval could possibly have its own unique length. So this takes care of the width of each rectangle. The width of each rectangle is going to be delta xi. For example, the width of the first rectangle is delta x1, the width of the second rectangle is delta x2, and so on and so forth. Next, we have to define the height of each rectangle. To do so, we have to pick a set of sample points, capital C. This entails picking a number from each subinterval. So go through each subinterval and pick any sample point in that subinterval. Previously, we picked left endpoint, right endpoint, and midpoint. But now you have a choice to pick anything you want. So here I picked C1 to be sort of this point here, and that defined the height. And then in C2, it looks like we picked this sample point, C2, and then f of C2 is going to be the height of this rectangle. Okay, so the goal of these sample points is to help define the height of each rectangle. The height of each rectangle is just going to be f evaluated at these sample points. Now we can go ahead and define the Riemann sum for this particular function, for this particular choice of partition and sample points, as the area of the first rectangle plus the area of the second rectangle plus dot 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 all the way up to the area of the last rectangle. And as we discussed before, the area of the first rectangle is going to be the width, which is delta x1, times the height, which is going to be f of c1, plus the area of the second rectangle, whose width is delta x2, times the height, which is f of the sample point, C2. So that's where these expressions are coming from. Using sigma notation, we can compactly represent this as the sum from I equals 1 to n of the heights, f evaluated at each sample point, multiplied by the width of each subinterval. And this time, please note that we cannot factor out the delta xi, because each subinterval could have a different length. And so this expression that you're looking at here is called a Riemann sum. This is the general Riemann sum. And in the previous videos, when we looked at the endpoint approximations and the midpoint approximations, they were just special examples and special cases of the general Riemann sum, where delta xi was always a fixed constant. It was defined to be the length of the interval divided by the number of rectangles. As a result, delta xi was just always this fixed number. And then the sample points were chosen to be either the left or right endpoints or the midpoint. But now in the general Riemann sum, it could be any sample point within that subinterval. Now let's introduce a new piece of terminology, which is called the norm of a partition P. The norm of a partition P, which is denoted using these double absolute value bars, is just the maximum of all the widths, right? Delta xi represents the width of each subinterval. Just take the largest width, that's called the norm. Now, Riemann sums are just approximations to areas. And we saw that as we take more and more rectangles, these approximations get better and approach the true area. In this case, instead of taking n approaching infinity, where n is the number of rectangles, we want the norm to approach 0. That is, we want the widest subinterval to become infinitely thin, because then of course the rest of the subintervals will also become infinitely thin. And so if we take the limit as the norm approaches 0, and that limit is well defined, we get something called a definite integral. And so let's take a look at this definition. If we take the limit as the norm approaches 0, and all possible Riemann sums, no matter how you pick the partition or how you pick the sample points, approach a single unique value L, then we define the definite integral from a to b of f of x to be that special number L. In other words, this definite integral is notation to represent the limit of these Riemann sums. So if this limit exists, no matter the partition, no matter the sample points, and all of these limits approach the same very special value L, we call this value L the definite integral. And we also say that f is integrable over this closed interval from a to b. Let's unpack this integral notation. So the a and b here are called limits of integration. The function over here is called the integrand, the thing that is being integrated. And this process is called integration. And x here is just dummy variable. You can use t here, you can use u here, you can change the variable however you like. And now let's state this very nice theorem. If f is continuous on a closed interval, or f is continuous except at finitely many jump discontinuities on your interval a to b, then it turns out f is integrable over this closed interval ab. In other words, for these nice functions where you have continuous functions and functions that have just finitely many jump discontinuities, the above limits will always exist no matter the partitioning, no matter the sample points. All Riemann sums will approach the exact same value, and that value we denote using the definite integral. Next, let's come back to this idea of signed area. You remember at the beginning when I mentioned that for a Riemann sum, the function f can take on any value, positive and negative. And so we have to sort of reason about these negative heights. How do we interpret these negative heights? And so this leads us to this idea of signed area. It turns out that the value of the definite integral is not the area under the curve, but it's actually the signed area under the curve f. So let's talk about this concept of signed area. Regions above the x-axis are going to contribute positive area, and regions below the x-axis are going to contribute negative area. So if you were to take the definite integral of this curve over the closed interval from a to b, then the calculation is going to find this area and it's going to contribute positively to the value of the definite integral. It's also going to compute this area, but it's going to contribute negatively to the value of the definite integral. And so the definite integral represents the signed area between the graph of the function f and the x-axis over the interval from a to b. In other words, regions that are above the x-axis are going to contribute positively to this value, and regions that are below the x-axis are going to contribute negatively to this value. They're going to take away from this value. That is the concept of signed area. So if your function is always above the x-axis, i.e. it's non-negative, then the signed area is equivalent to regular area as we know it. But when your function takes on some negative values, well then you might not actually get the total area if you were to add up all the areas together. You might get something smaller because all the regions below the x-axis will contribute negatively to the total. So now let's take a look at a quick example. Let's suppose we want to find the value of the definite integral from 0 to 5 of 3 minus x dx, and we want to compare that with the value of the definite integral from 0 to 5 of the absolute value of 3 minus x dx. So let's begin by making a plot of what this region even looks like. So the function f of x equals 3 minus x is just a straight line with y-intercept 3, slope -1, and we're going to plot it over the interval from 0 to 5. And so the definite integral of this function just represents the signed area under this region. This area will contribute positively, and this area will contribute negatively to the value of this definite integral. Since this region is very simple, we can use geometry to figure out A1 and A2, where A1 and A2 are the areas of these two regions. The first region is just a triangle whose base is 3 and height is also 3. So by area of a triangle formula, the area of this region is just going to be 1/2 times 9, so 9 halves. And since this region lies above the x-axis, in terms of signed area, it's going to be positive 9/2. Now let's take a look at the second region. So this is also a triangle. The base happens to be 2 units, and the height also happens to be 2 units. And so the area of this region is just going to be 1/2 times 2 times 2, which is just 2. But since this region lies below the x-axis, in terms of signed area, we write -2. Now remember, the definite integral represents the signed area under the function. As a result, all the regions above the x-axis contribute positively, and all the regions below the x-axis contribute negatively. So we add these two numbers up, and we get a final answer of 5/2. Now in the other definite integral, we have the absolute value of 3 minus x. What this does is it takes this negative region and reflects it and makes it non-negative, like so. And so now you can go ahead and compute A1 and A2 again, which is the area of these regions. It's the same values from before. A1 is going to be 9/2 and A2 is just going to be 2. But now both of them lie above the x-axis. As a result, in terms of signed area, they both contribute positively. So they're both positive. Therefore, the value of the definite integral in this case is 9/2 plus 2, which is 13/2. And so this example should give us an idea. If you're interested in just finding the total area that is bounded between the function and the x-axis without focusing on like these negative and positive areas, then what you can do is take the integral, the definite integral of the absolute value of the function. Because what that will do is make all the negative regions positive. And so everything will contribute positively to the value of the definite integral, and you'll get like sort of like the total area between the function and the x-axis. But if you just compute the definite integral as is, then what you end up getting is something called signed area, right? And this value could be a little bit smaller because regions that are below the x-axis will contribute negatively to the total. Let's take a look at one more example in which we want to calculate the value of the definite integral from 0 to b of x squared dx, where b is some positive constant. So what's going on here is that we have a parabola y equals x squared, and we're trying to find the area under the parabola from 0 to b, so on this closed interval. Now since this shape is curved, we cannot use simple geometry formulas to find the area under this curve. Hence, we will have to compute it as a limit of Riemann sums. And because f of x equals x squared is a continuous function, it is integrable. That means that every Riemann sum will approach the same value in the limit, no matter which partitioning or which set of sample points we use. And so in particular, right endpoint approximations, Rn, will converge to the value of the definite integral. And so we will just solve this problem by computing the limit of the right endpoint approximations. So as usual, we begin by dividing our interval into n subintervals of equal width. Let's call it delta x. To do that, we take the length of the interval, which is b minus 0, and divide by the number of rectangles. Let's call it n. So the width of each rectangle or each subinterval is going to be b over n. They're all going to have the same width in right endpoint approximations. Now we compute the expression that represents each right endpoint. To do that, we start at a, which happens to be 0. Then we add multiples of the width, delta x, and we get this expression, b over ni. And the last ingredient that we need to compute the right endpoint approximation is to find the value of the function at these right endpoints. So for that reason, we're just going to take this and plug it into the function, which is f of x equals x squared. So when we square this right endpoint expression, we get b squared over n squared times I squared. Now that we have all the ingredients, let's just plug it into the right endpoint approximation formula, where we have to multiply the widths by the sum of all the function values evaluated at the right endpoints. So all the widths are just b over n, and then we have to sum up the function evaluated at the right endpoints, and this is the expression we just computed. Now we can factor out the b squared and the n squared because those are constants with respect to the summation. The summation is with respect to I. I is what's varying. Now we have written the right endpoint approximation in terms of power sums. So we can use the power sum formula to replace this and get here. Now we want to get ready to take the limit. So for that reason, I have to divide each number by n. That way these n's will cancel, and over here the n can go inside the brackets and I can divide by n and divide by n, and that will give me 1 plus 1 over n. And here I will get 2 plus 1 over n. And then we will expand everything out here. Then we will FOIL this out and distribute this term here to get this final nice simplified expression for the right endpoint approximation. Finally, the value of the definite integral from 0 to b of x squared dx is simply the limit of these right endpoint approximations, which we have a nice simplified expression for. So as n approaches infinity, this term and this term will approach 0. And so the value of this limit is just b cubed over 3. That's the value of this definite integral. It represents the signed area under the parabola from 0 to b. In this case, since the parabola is always non-negative, the signed area is equivalent to actual area as we know it. And that brings us to the end of today's video, in which we learned about Riemann sums, and we use that to define the definite integral. It turns out that the definite integral is just the value of the limit of Riemann sums when that limit exists. Now the good news is that in this course, which is supposed to be a first-year calculus course, we're not really going to do too many problems involving general Riemann sums. If you really understand the endpoint approximations and the midpoint approximations, then I'll be more than happy with that. If you are interested in general Riemann sums, then I encourage you to take a course on real analysis. But the point was to nicely connect the ideas that we were talking about with these endpoint approximations and midpoint approximations. And what we were really studying was special cases of Riemann sums. And the idea behind a general Riemann sum is not too much more complicated. And that's really where the definite integral comes from. And moreover, as we progress throughout this course, the goal will be to step away from computing the value of definite integrals using the limit definition as a limit of Riemann sums, but we want to develop better techniques and much more efficient ways of calculating the values of these definite integrals. So that's what we are going to be working towards. In the next lesson, we're going to take a look at some of the properties of the definite integral. And so I hope to see you then. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe for more content. And if you have any questions or thoughts, feel free to leave a comment down below. I would love to hear from you.